Hello and welcome to the second episode of the Bizzlogic Podcast. My name is Johannes, aka Joe, aka the co-host, aka whatever. And I'm happy to welcome some guests today, starting with Juliana from our friends from Jan and June, a sustainable fashion brand, one of the friends here in the house here.
Yeah, also welcome from my side. I'm Fabio, aka the other co-host, and I'm also happy to welcome Simon here, founder of For Real and Dionysus, a virtual fashion brand, which is also something super interesting. And I think in combination of our two guests, we're gonna have some super interesting topics to cover today. And I don't know, should we start? Do you want to introduce yourself a little bit, Simon? Do you want to tell a little bit about what you do? I mean, we've been knowing each other for almost 6-7 years, if I remember right. You also invited me to some of your podcasts. So this time it's the other way around. You can talk a little bit about what you do and what led you here and what led you, most interestingly, to creating a virtual fashion brand.
All of that in one sentence?
Yeah, all of that in one sentence.
First of all, thanks for having me. And I'm really glad you're doing this kind of project right now because I think podcasts are amazing. My name is Simon. I've been working, as you already kind of teased a bit, in the XR industry since 2014. Back then, as creative technologists, people would phrase it like that today, but that term wasn't invented back then. But still, I know my way around technology.
Yeah, we were nerds back then. So.
Okay. Well, there are actually companies utilizing the nerd scheme right now. I mean, we could do that as well. How about a nerd podcast? No, and from that role, I kind of made the transition into being a consultant. Like, mostly I advise people, companies, brands, institutions, whoever kindly asks me to point out what they could or how they could utilize metaverse technologies like VR, AR for their businesses, how they could transform their products and services and so on. And whatever they're coming up with, I try to handle the challenges they bring onto my desk. That's in short what I do.
And most recently also AI, right?
Yeah, and I'm also an AI expert now. I like to fool around with technology, always have enjoyed that, and generative AI especially is super interesting and can result in stunning output in just a couple of seconds, actually. And this is where I kind of took the concept I had in a drawer. Do you say that in English as well? Yeah, I had a concept, an idea for a virtual fashion brand. Amazing. For over 2 years or something, but I never could find the time to actually pull this off, like create visuals and actually write the story. And now I took ChatGPT and Midjourney for a spin, and that was how Dionysus was born, my virtual fashion brand that is an origami techwear brand that also is infused by Japanese and Greek culture and mythology. Yeah, it's quite
super interesting.
I like it. I like the outcome.
And probably the completely opposite of approach of what Juliana, you were doing with Jan and June, right? So I think you co-founded Jan and June in 2014 with one of the main goals being to build a sustainable fashion brand, right?
Yeah. So when we started, I have a co-founder, Anna, and we were just students. So we were going to university. And a big Swedish fashion brand was back then launching a sub-brand. And we were like, okay, this is their chance to go sustainable. This is their chance to go more fair because they already announced it's going to be a little bit higher priced. It's going to be their own supply chain and a whole new brand. And we were like, okay, this is like the start of fashion industry getting better, getting fairer, getting more sustainable. And then they started and it was not at all. And we were like, it can't be so hard to build a sustainable fashion brand that is also affordable. And we were naive. We were students. We were 20-something.
Oh, we all know the fruit.
And we were like, let's just do it ourselves. It has to be possible. I was still trying. And it's
I mean, you've grown out of that quite a bit. How many people are you now at
18.
18, wow. Okay.
Yeah, we basically have our own online shop, but we also deliver fashion to like 150 shops.
Wow, congratulations.
Thanks. So that's quite a lot, yeah. We're not that small anymore.
No, you also create all the designs yourself, right? So, but in a completely different way than probably Simon does. So you're probably taking the more classic fashion approach, I would suggest, right?
Yeah, so it's feels like we're both doing fashion, but it's so different.
Yeah.
And I'm really excited to hear about it today from you.
Actually, why don't we just jump into that, right?
Yeah.
And maybe tell us a bit how that happens and how you are using maybe even digital technology to support that, to make it more sustainable and to also for marketing purposes. If you're using what kind of 3D tools you're using, or if you're using 3D tools, maybe just tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so for us, it's mainly the product development, where we started to use 3D programs to have the first prototypes of an item, of a blouse or a shirt or whatever we are doing. And it's been really amazing, because when we started in the very first beginning, and with some production facilities, we still work that way. It's not digital. So you have like actual pattern makers who make pattern, and then they sew the first prototypes. But like, I think when Simon started working with us, it's one of my product managers, he was like really pushing the digital development of clothes. And then we did the first protos in 3D, and it's really cool, because you basically don't need the first 2 to 3 samples that you're usually making. Yeah. And so you can skip the first part.
So right there's already like a sustainability aspect to it, that you're using less material.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Less work.
Yeah.
It's just still, let's say, not so common. So you don't have...
It really depends on the designer also.
It depends on the designer, but also on the factories later. Do they need the pattern made from paper so they can cut the fabric? Or do you just send the file and they...
I mean, you don't have to care about the supplier or the
Not yet.
production yet, right? Because your fashion's solely digital. So can you tell a little bit about your approach and
Well, my workflow always is a bit different. I come up with an idea and smash that, or try to explain an AI what I want to achieve. So basically, I'm using words to create. Are you showing that?
Yeah, I'm just throwing on some of the designs so Juliana can also have an image of what this looks like, right? So unfortunately, we only have one image here right now, but for the listeners and viewers, we're gonna throw in some more pictures so they can have an idea.
So basically, it's all about prompting. Prompting is describing to an AI what you want to achieve, what you want to have depicted, and to come to that output I have here. It's kind of like that paragraph, like written in, 12 points. It's quite a lot of text, actually. And then you influence, of course, the output. But in general, you need to recognize patterns you want to recreate. For example, the main challenge for Dionysus was to have a recognizable style. And that is quite hard to achieve if you don't know what you're doing with artificial intelligence, because the output is rather random. That's in the core of the technology. And finding that kind of solution was it was a challenge. And now it's super easy for me to do one collection after another, but they only exist as these 2D files, and they are far away from being even real virtual fashion that people could wear in other.
Which is interesting, yeah.
I'm super curious. I'm sorry, I have to ask this question. What is when you see something like this, right? And hear how, he went about designing and creating this, what is like the first thing that pops into your mind? Like what's your first thought when you hear that? Exactly, what kind of workflow there's behind creating a real fashion brand. When you hear, then there's no wrong answers, right? You can say whatever you want, no wrong answers.
The first thing that pops into my mind when I see this kind of designs, I was thinking like, how is this possible in real life? How to make, because they are obviously very special and quite complex and complicated pattern, you used. And I was already like, oh, what material could that be in reality?
Okay, that's a very practical approach.
Very practical approach. You asked me what I was thinking.
Like I said, no wrong answers. I was thinking, okay, maybe she thinks, what, just 12 words and he's already at this or something like that. I don't know, right? That's what I'm sure you had a trial and error period that
Absolutely.
was also
quite long.
Yeah.
And what I found the most interesting thing is that despite you starting with a complete digital approach, the output is not actually a 3D model of a thing, but you have like an actual picture that describes the output very well, but you don't have the actual 3D asset, which, like vice versa, what Juliana was just telling us, coming from the practical approach and designing the things in 3D, the output is also, or can also be in 3D. Is there something that will allow you, either now, I don't know if that's already the case, or in the future, to take these designs and then transform them into 3D models and then probably have these kind of more practical approaches to build like a physical fashion brand sometimes in the future? Or isn't that even like a thought that you...
I'd say we'll get there, but right now this is rather complicated. So there are, of course, generative AI models that can output 3D content. But they're not on the level that I could upload, for example, this picture and would receive an amazingly done 3D asset that I could then use for creating maybe real fashion, even because once it's 3D, it's an entirely different level. Here, I wouldn't know either. I don't know anything about creating real fashion, obviously. I don't know anything about the materials. I kind of think this has been given because I integrated techwear as a term, and this is, of course, not all the typical stuff. It looks a lot like techwear. It usually looks Gore-Tex and whatever. Apart from that, I wouldn't know. I wouldn't know how to actually make the pattern to work with, and maybe an AI could help me, or probably more likely a real designer. That might be the way to go down. That's actually what I've been working on, or trying to work on, with a Clo 3D actual fashion tool for real designs.
Okay.
But I've just downloaded it and I don't know anything about it yet.
So do you already have plans for the future in mind for the brand?
Yes.
So is the plan to bring it into actual reality at some point?
Let's be a bit not too fast here. Hold your horses. No, in general, the overall idea with this fashion brand was to tell a story. It's an experiment in visual and textual storytelling, like really developing a brand that's not just one or two cool pictures, but has a recognizable effect and a story, a background, a founder, a showroom now, as you see in the video below. And the next step would be to actually recreate the fashion in 3D and make it wearable for avatars and the metaverse or whatever platforms that are connected to it, and augmented reality filters. And maybe one day, maybe real fashion, but I wouldn't bet on that right now.
Okay, so the roadmap is go digital first, like go virtual and
then digital, yeah.
And then digital. Okay, interesting.
So, sorry, you weren't even going to say?
I was curious what the other words were.
Which of these?
For the
weird,
like you said, it was techwear, or?
Yeah, techwear, and there are plenty of real techwear brands. That's a lot about where that is. How do you define that? Do you know the brand Acronym, for example? It looks like tech ninjas and stuff like that. Yeah, it's mostly black stuff that is really functional and looks kind of like that ninja aesthetics. And it's pretty common in the cyberpunk nerd sphere, and it's quite expensive. It's high fashion mostly. And this is basically what inspired me to do this.
Yeah, Joe and I are looking like aliens because we have no clue what you're doing.
No, but actually, that's what I was just going to go into, right? Because I think that our goal, obviously, with the pod is to take these tech topics and make them applicable to the real world, right? To show people, in this case, the fashion industry, but also, coming up in the next episodes from other industries, but to show them, the real world applications and how easy it is actually to use this kind of a platform to, create user engagement, to show products, and those kind of, to network. So to get our feet back on the ground for a second, I was going to ask you maybe if you could just tell us a bit about like some, I don't know, 2 or 3 challenges that you have right now maybe, with regards to online marketing or or in general in your brand, like 2 or 3, or in your industry, 2 or 3 challenges that you're working towards, whether it's sustainability, whether it's e-commerce, but that your challenges that you're facing right now.
That could be solved with this kind of technology.
Not necessarily. I mean, perhaps there are some things that you're floating around in your everyday business that you haven't thought of an application. And also, I'm not saying that the metaverse is the key to all those things, but obviously we're interested in getting a feel for the industries and what kind of challenges there are, because at the end of the day, we and other producers of metaverse platforms, need to see where those real world applications are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we kind of talked a little bit about this already. So maybe for everyone who's listening, we're kind of neighbors. So we share the office. Mm-hmm. So we see each other almost every day. And we're, as I was telling before, we not only have our own online shop, but we also do sales, like have a B2B business with stores. And we are facing a lot of trouble how to show them our collections, because in Germany, I would say the whole fashion week is like really decreasing. The whole fairs, everything that we knew from before COVID is kind of like vanished, and we don't really have platforms anymore to show what we are doing to sell our clothes to other shops. Mm-hmm. And why I think the whole development is really, really strong in Germany. Also, it is not so easy for other markets in the fashion industry itself. It's the question is, will there still be fairs? Is this still the future, or is the future digital? And you have a digital showroom, and this is how you reach your customers. And this is something we have already talking about and thinking about. And I think this is something that keeps crossing our minds. Like, obviously, we don't know how it's going to go. It's not really, there are no real big players anymore in the German fashion scene when it comes to platforms. And right now, I feel like it's a little bit maybe too early for the digital showrooms, because still, I mean, I wouldn't know so much if we wouldn't sit on the same floor. Yeah.
Well, what did you say, Simon? sorry, Joe. Is it too early? I know you brought some use cases along from your consultancy, and like from what you have been telling other fashion brands or like your clients in general of what's been done in the metaverse already. So here, for example, we have a case of Tommy Hilfiger expanding like their Roblox partnership by launching like a hybrid kind of fashion show. I'm just gonna play this video in the background here so everyone can get an idea. But I think this was basically like a real fashion line that was taken onto the Roblox platform, obviously in a super abstract way, with a catwalk, with everything, with a social aspect, with people like being in the platform, watching the virtual fashion show as well as the real one.
Yeah, I'd say it highly depends on what you want to achieve, right? I mean, in the end, exploring or going into the metaverse on these platforms is a lot about defining your goals first. If you want to sell actual fashion, I mean, this might help. I don't know the numbers beyond the Tommy Play and Parallels cases particularly, but for also your brand has a distinct audience, and you have to see whether you can reach them by these channels, right? I mean, if you could easily integrate, and that's not rocket science, as you don't know that, but we do know that it's not rocket science to actually have that kind of virtual showroom. But the main question here would be, would it actually help you as of now to sell real fashion? And what these brands do, like Tommy and also Bizzlogic and all the other big names in the field, they are exploring new revenue streams. They are selling virtual fashion as well. So having a digital clone of your real fashion piece, or even an entire digital collection, which will bring you real money on platforms like Roblox and Fortnite. So it's not really easy to answer if that would really... It's possible now, as we see, and it could be feasible for young brands or brands that want to attract Gen Z, Gen Alpha, young audiences that are digitally native, but you have to be kind of not careful, that might be the wrong phrasing, but you should be clear about your intentions when entering that space.
So you would say that rather than like promoting the physical fashion brand and these kind of use cases, or also I think the Balenciaga and Fortnite use case is super interesting for that. The main goal was not to promote the physical fashion, but rather to aim at a younger target audience and have kind of this branding initiative, right?
I think if you break it down, you could basically say also, for the viewers to make it a bit more clear that you have the intentions of going in where we're a fashion brand, right? Whoever it may be, whether it's Gucci, Balenciaga, whoever, we're a fashion brand and we specialize in design and we specialize in trying to get a feel for, what people want and what people want to use to express themselves. And that is the motivation behind creating, digital collections right now, right? So what we're also trying to explore, obviously, is what are the use cases for not just brick and mortar fashion retailers, but in general, whether what is happening in the metaverse can translate and how it would translate into a real world business.
Yeah, and I believe that something like a showroom, like we were discussing in the past, could be a real use case, because you have more and more of these tools, like Marvelous Designer, or what were you mentioning before, Clovia?
3D.
Clo3, that allow you to basically bring the real haptics, or not the haptics, but like the feel of the fabrics,
the physics,
and the physics into the virtual world. That I think we're super close to being able to translate it completely to 3D. Whereas if you would go through a virtual showroom, this could really be the convincing factor of you like seeing this collection or seeing this specific product and wanting to buy it.
One point that's really interesting here is that it depends a lot on whether a brand is already working with 3D tools or not.
Yeah.
I've encountered that topic or challenge quite often in the past 2 years. Was like, okay, but we don't work digitally, so we don't have any 3D designs. But if you have 3D designs, it's not, once again, not rocket science to actually move them to a virtual showroom. Of course, you have to optimize them. But if you have that kind of foundation, I wouldn't say it's a no-brainer, but it's doable, achievable, might be really a cool thing to do, depending on your audience, of course, right?
So sorry, because I think we interrupted Juliana. You mentioned that one thing is obviously visibility, right? If you mentioned that the shows are not being held in the frequency that they were before, some of the platforms that you would have had in the past either are not coming back fast enough for your own needs, or just not in that volume. Did I interpret that correctly?
I'd rather say that there's already a movement in the market going on, especially for fairs or showrooms, that it kind of seems like their time has passed.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But there's not really a solution yet, in the sense of, because there is a virtual solution. There could be a virtual solution, but it's maybe not spread far enough yet, so not everyone knows about it.
So it's your needs are not being met yet. It's not at a point where you're saying, these are, tools that are giving me what I need right now.
Let's rather say that I'm not sure if my clients would already be ready for this, but this is just a matter of time, right?
Yeah, of course. Technology is constantly evolving.
Exactly, and everyone gets more comfortable with it.
Yeah, exactly.
And also, like we were discussing in the last episode, I think there are big misconceptions about what is the metaverse. Are glasses required to enter it or not? I think for people from these different industries, I think it's just not tangible enough yet to be able to be used as a real use case for their business. Would you agree with that?
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
I think, Simon invited me a while back for a panel discussion, and this came up as part of it, right? I think that, and maybe this sort of, we can tie that into what you were saying, is that fashion to us, or I think to most people, is still such a high street brick and mortar thing. You walk into a shop, the display is organized in a specific way. There's a look and feel. You've got like the smells are designed, right? So this is what everybody sort of still connects with that. But we can see it all the time that, the shops are dying, right? Here in Hamburg, we've got big department stores that are shutting down because that business is not working anymore. And this is one of the points that I also made on the panel discussion, is that we've got a huge demographic shift that's about to happen, not just in Germany, not just in Europe, but in North America, in Asia, right? Where this entire generation that was so economically performant is on their way out the door, right? And when that happens, these younger generations, the ones that are now using Roadblocks, the ones that are in Fortnite, the ones that are more tech savvy, they'll be looking for a different thing. I'm not saying brick and mortar is dead, right? I'm not saying it's gonna no longer be a factor, but there are these channels that a lot of big brands and a lot of small brands are not using enough yet, and are not. It's also like, get in there, make mistakes, learn from it. The time is now, because right now those mistakes might not hurt you that much, right? And also there are enough platforms out there that should give you a lot of ways and means. And this is where I want to tie back in. I know your brand, one of the your USPs, your characteristics, is that it's a sustainable fashion brand. So. And I think that I watch your Instagram, I watch your social media activities. You guys are already very good at storytelling, I find, personally, right?
Thank you.
You're welcome. I did some preparation for the podcast. And do you think that is something, specifically storytelling, right? Because I think a lot of fashion brands try to shoehorn stories into their brand image, and it sometimes feels a little bit disconnected. I think in your case, you actually have a huge potential for storytelling. Do you think that's something that might work in the metaverse?
Well, actually, there's a really good example, and I wish we did that, but we didn't. It's another sustainable fashion brand. It's not from Europe, so I'm going to tell it. So they basically promoted the fashion show that didn't happen, and they kind of had all the numbers and figures of how much CO2 and everything was saved by not having a fashion show. Mm-hmm. And but it still looked like as if they were having one. Mm-hmm. And everyone got, like, with the newsletter, got an invitation to the fashion show. And then last minute was like, okay, this show is not happening because we're not doing one, because this is like really bad for the environment, because. And it was really good. I was like, wow, I wish that was my idea.
And by the way, here are the outputs.
And this is, for example, this could have been, they didn't do it like in the metaverse. They did it with photos, so they kind of like faked it. But you could do that obviously with like a show,
like a metaverse. Yeah. Okay. So if you take that story, right, and what I was talking about before, right, the big brands that are maybe not, I mean, obviously we have a lot of big brands that are already trying some metaverse projects to address their needs, and to also talk to those younger audiences. Do you see a potential for maybe a younger, smaller but also more dynamic brand to adapt to these kind of developments?
Well, let's say I still feel like when you're a really, really big brand, and you were just talking about the demographics and how this is changing, and I think then you have to start very early to think about what it's going to do with your target group and who your target group will be in the future, because you're not as agile. And when you're a rather small brand as we are, I think it's also important, because it's like, I mean, this is not going to go away. This is just going to come more and more into our lives, into our real lives. So I think what for us as a rather small brand, the good thing is that we can try out different things and see what's going to work for us. So it could be like a virtual showroom, or like this kind of fashion show that in a way that is like more sustainable, because we don't actually do a fashion show or a showroom, but it could also be, maybe think about the economic side as well. Like, could we do something to avoid dead stock and overproduction, because we can already kind of put clothes on avatars that maybe have your size and your measurements and things like that for our customer in the end. And this is also very interesting, because then it's more than image and marketing and fun, because I'm pretty sure that most of what we saw is probably goes from marketing, branding measures, and it's not yet there that it also can save resources and money.
Super interesting. I think that's also been our approach at Bizzlogic, because we also have a use case. We're starting to explore the space, right? We don't have like an actual use case, but we made some interesting experiences trying out programs like Marvelous Designer, for example, to build these fabrics and implement them into our environments, and creating these kind of virtual show or fashion show scenarios. And our goal from the beginning was, not to necessarily build a digital fashion brand or virtual clothing for avatars, but rather like take it from the other side, what you were just saying, trying to build something that really helps like existing fashion brands or physical fashion brands to showcase their new product lines in a virtual catwalk, for example, or do something in that regard, right? I believe that this could be the way, like this could be like the next step of what you were talking about like this fashion show that didn't exist. You can make it exist again, but still have something sustainable and something social and something where people can like see your collections, kind of feel your collections in a way, and experience them in a new way.
It's still happening there.
It's still happening, exactly.
Because from the example that I was telling, they faked the fashion show. They talked about it in the end. They really used it in a marketing way that was really smart, but there was no actual experience. Yeah.
Yeah. Where would you say could be the bridge to have something sustainable for an existing business who wants to try out the technology, but still just doesn't want to have like marketing expenditures and a branding initiative, and that's it?
Yeah, as stated earlier, it's not rocket science per se, and you don't have to reinvent the wheel, right? There are solutions one brand can, even smaller brands and businesses can utilize and experiment in the field and just try to figure out what's working, how's my audience resonating to our approach here. And I would really encourage people to try that. And I think there's a lot of potential there without too many effort. Like, you don't have to build your own world like at large. You don't have to build your own metaverse platform. You need easy access, of course, if you are not aiming at platforms like Roblox, for example, where you have, of course, a huge audience of over 60 million people daily, all that could potentially see your work. But having it integrated into your existing communication strategy, for example, on the website, a teaser, that's what I did with my
I think it's a great example, yeah.
Yeah, and this has been not a lot of work, actually one weekend or something where, well, I hate spare time, obviously. I don't know, I created a virtual showroom, like we've seen that in the video a bit. And that's not, again, I'm kind of stressing the term, but it's not rocket science. This is a freely available platform that does...
It's done on Spatial. Right?
Spatial.io, yes. And it's not like, it doesn't cost you any money. It's very limited, but gives a very good first impression, especially to people who are not really tech savvy or nerdy or something. And you can drop the link, people can click it, it's integrated on the homepage, on LinkedIn, and so on and so on. And people like it a lot. It's kind of a mind opener. And you can integrate 3D designs as well. So it doesn't have to be the 500 million budget, marketing budget to enter the metaverse or something like that. So
I think that's a big misconception
absolutely.
We're having, right?
Yeah. And I also see there's lots of potential, especially showcasing designs and kind of audience test them without, I mean, emissions are one thing, but also the fashion industry is one of the dirtiest industries in the world, like in terms of pollution, environmental. And there could be, as you already stated, so much stuff that could be done better, also in a digital way. Of course, we will not, and you stated that as well, we will always have real fashion. I'm pretty sure about that, because we live unless we live, or live in a pod like the Matrix or something. I don't see that happen either. So, but maybe it's a bit about balance. But I don't know. I get carried away now.
So how is the future where we all sit here naked and our outfits are just projected over?
That sounds like a very intriguing episode. To sort of draw that connection to the real world that you were talking about, right? And also, you said it's not rocket science. So I think there's already an intersection of what we do as platform providers and platform hosts, and obviously a push in the fashion industry. You spoke about it earlier about digitalization, right? So we're all working with certain graphical file formats, and there's a big opportunity there, I think, to take what most labels already have and digitalize it in a way to make it accessible virtually on the browser, in a headset, whichever way, to get to those crowds, right? And it's already being done on many of these examples that we were talking about. But what I just see is there's still a big potential to showcase your actual designs, not stuff that is being shoehorned into a Roblox or into a sandbox look, but into a real world look. So that's a big market that I think is not being worked on enough yet.
Yeah, basically where the use case is not trying to target these 60 million daily active users on an existing platform, but rather try to build something like the next evolution of your own website, for example,
make
where
it
you
your
can
own, right? Make it your own by using a more adaptable, more creative platform, and then tell your own story, right? Because if it is yours, you have all the freedom of creative, freedom to design it
and lead people onto it, like you're doing it right now. Because if you think of your web shop or if you're e-commerce measures that you're taking, you probably run Google ads to bring people onto your shop. So these are things that can be done in combination with something like a virtual showroom, right? And also, I think the social aspect is something that should be stressed more. I think something like virtual pop-up shops could be a thing in the future, where instead of probably people coming onto like a classic e-commerce platform, you could have something like people greeting you and people introducing you to your brand and into your fashion line and showing you around.
Building a community that way, right? Yeah, because it's not as anonymous. It's more lifelike. And if you're good at the storytelling aspect, and you guys obviously already have a marketing machinery that's working quite well. I spoke about it earlier. I think you are a very visible brand. Maybe it's because I'm in your bubble, but I still believe you're doing a good job. I'm following other brands online as well, and I just think, that you're doing good there. But I think we also have to talk a little bit about the status quo of what most of the projects that are out there doing right now, which brings us also to what we were talking about earlier, that we have brands that are not necessarily out there trying to promote their actual designs, but out there to just build a community up to create a connection on Roblox, on Minecraft, and all these platforms, and do that by, and I'm surprised we've made it to the, I think, 40-minute mark. We haven't mentioned the word NFT yet.
True that.
And we don't want to go too far into that, right? Because the viewers that may not be as literate on that subject. Again, you don't need to know what an NFT is to do anything on the metaverse, but it is helpful because it's a term that you're going to stumble across on a regular basis. So, maybe give us in a couple of sentences how you...
Yeah, I mean, in the end, NFTs, non-fungible tokens, are nothing else but a license for a digital asset. You can buy them on marketplaces like OpenSea, whatever. And then the narrative is that you can bring your digital assets, but it's not only digital assets, of course, it's license rights, whatever is bound to that. But legally, it's kind of complicated. Let's not dive into that. You can take these assets everywhere. That's the narrative, and this is obviously not the case yet. So, for example,
interoperability is not there yet, or
and it's, pardon my French, is rather complicated. I was about to say another word for that, but it's really complicated on the technological level. For example, you have a 3D design. Which platforms do actually support your not optimized 3D asset? Well, and so on and so on. But apart from that, it's a really intriguing technology that could play a major role in the future, but probably not as much as many companies right now tell the story. Like, you buy your virtual shoes and you can have them in every metaverse, but no, not likely, and maybe not ever going to happen. But it will be really interesting because, of course, you can create artificial scarcity. You can limit your digital collections or even have phygital collections like Nike does, for example, with artifact shoes, sneakers. And it's interesting, and a certain target audience really does resonate really, really well with these kinds of approaches because, well, they don't differentiate between online and offline too much anymore. And okay, I have these amazing virtual sneakers for my avatar, and I can even have them in real life. Boom, mind blown.
would you say NFTs are a necessity?
No, absolutely. Because let's face it, most digital goods, like the most revenue that has been created by digital goods, has nothing to do with the blockchain and NFTs at all. It's on platforms like Fortnite, Roblox, and so on. And we're talking billions, not millions here. So you don't need NFTs for that.
Yeah, probably a really good example is this one. From Samuel Jordan, apparently creating 90K revenue monthly just from selling digital assets on Roblox, which is crazy.
Yeah, from earrings, from a couple of cents, shoes. He's working with major fashion brands, Burberry, Gucci, and so on. He's creating assets, yeah. It's doing quite well, and the numbers are from, I think, 2021, I guess. So, Roblox has increased their user base since then by, I think, almost 20 million or 15 million people. So he's probably earning more these days. But that's just an assumption. I don't have any proof.
Yeah, I think the article was all around half a year old, right?
Or 1 year or something.
Yeah.
Or even older. I don't know. But still, quite a lot of potential there.
Yeah, I mean, coming back to the physical world, what would you say, or where would you say the metaverse can contribute to more sustainability? Is it more in production? Is it rather in the commerce sector, or is it in the storytelling only?
This domain, you can have a whole episode about the sustainability and the metaverse, right? There's so many different layers to this. For example, of course, production workflows, efficiency, saving emissions and other harmful chemicals, avoiding them from spreading all over the world, travel costs, travel frequency reduction. And of course, storytelling plays a major role because you can, of course, via the metaverse, VR, and other media, educate people better about what impact certain developments actually have on the planet and our society and so on. And additionally, of course, the shift towards more digitally focused type of consumerism might also play a role. But this is a bit, a bit of kind of, I say, Kaffeesatzleserei. I don't know how they say that.
Reading in the tea leaves.
Oh yeah, okay, kind of like that, right? I mean, this is kind of an assumption that people are now also using as a narrative. Everything will be better with the metaverse. We don't know that yet, but there's potential. Let's phrase it that way.
Yeah, okay.
What would you say, if you're not into the whole gaming part, what would your first touch point be with the metaverse in the future for like a regular person?
That's a good question. Or for a regular person, or specifically maybe for a young fashion brand?
Yeah, for fashion, yeah.
So, I mean, there's a few ways to go about it, but and we've obviously been rolling around some ideas. But One thing, for example, where I see a huge opportunity is like limited editions in the real world, right? In other words, let's say a fashion brand such as Jan and June creates a fashion show that they, advertise on their social media channels. They invite, fans, guests, or just, people into the show, and then in the show, perhaps even, have an NFT that is auctioned off or that can be bought, which gives you, perhaps if you hold it, access to a limited edition that Jan and June then produces sometime down the road. And, you're already at a point where you have brand recognition. I regularly meet people, in the outside world that know who Jan and June is, that think that it's a cool brand and that might be interested in a limited edition of yours, right? And this is obviously an example that wouldn't just apply to Jan and June, but to, a lot of other companies out there. And beyond that, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be that, because for that you even have to be, in the whole NFT generating business, which obviously is also not good science, as Sam was telling us. But even just have a showroom, right? A showroom where you have either NPCs walking with your designs, NPCs being non-player characters. We use that term, but obviously it's not an actual avatar that is being navigated by an actual person, but just one that just walks through the room, automated. But just have a digital showroom where you show your designs with real physics in the textures, in the designs. And where you can have someone that answers questions, where you can have community building activities, even games, right? There's a lot of stuff that you can already do, and it would just be like your website or an add-on to your website, right?
I like the idea of thinking of it as an additional communications channel. You have the power to utilize that, and you don't have to do it all at once. You can just start slowly creating a showroom, and then think about what your audience actually wants and what kind of feedback they give you, and integrate new features, for example. And especially the communications and socializing part is super, super crucial, because this whole metaverse topic, like people that are not really, like, I often experience that people kind of limit this to technology, but the metaverse and every platform in that kind of cosmos or universe is about human connectivity, because without human, this is kind of a bland experience, and there's a lot of stuff to build on, especially meet and greet with ambassadors, building and communicating in a more natural way than Zoom calls and breakout sessions. There's a huge potential there, even without VR devices. So yeah, and you can take it, and I like that analogy, like step by step. It's always, you don't have to do everything at once, I'd say.
And then also trial and error, right? Most of our clients, for example, if you look at them right now, they're trying to go to, okay, let's build something approach, and then try to utilize it for different purposes and different use cases, and just see what works best. For some, it might be like internal collaboration tools. For some, it might be the showroom that allows them to communicate to the outside world. For some, it might be something completely different. I think it's, as you were saying before, now's the time to try it out and to make mistakes, and not, not losing anything by doing that.
And there's also, let's be honest, there's another side aspect to this whole thing, and that is because it is currently, a hype topic out there.
True.
You can literally generate content for your other channels by just having an event in the metaverse, right? Because it's something that you can record in such a way that it shows, hey guys, we're doing digital events, we've got our designs in the metaverse, and make a story out of that you can then spin on Instagram, on other channels, right? To give you more content.
Pretty interesting. No, really, it is. It is, because it just you start to think very differently about certain things and topics that you're used to do in the classic way, and it's just, my head starts spinning right now.
I know it's out of the box for a lot of brands out there, especially you guys. Your marketing, and when you see the content that you guys are putting out there, it's so perfected, right? It's so highly curated. that, you have to be careful to see if we can find a way and look and feel that will still go along with that. But because we're in a digital realm, and because we're using, in our case, Unreal Engine 5, which is like, the top tool that is being used by all the big game producers out there, there's a lot of realism in terms of lighting and physics and designs that we can achieve that comes, as close as possible.
And it's only getting better.
And it's getting better all the time. You build something like that, another sustainability aspect, right? You build something like that, even if it's just a one-time event, you see how it goes, right? You got all the readouts. You see, okay, how engaged were users? Where were they moving around? Which was the design they liked the most? You could have polls in there, right, where people vote on which one they like the best. And you can take all that data that you can collect out of an event like that and improve on it. And say, okay, next time, I don't know, we need a smaller room because we need people to be closer together, or we need a catwalk where the models are walking on the ceiling, or whatever, right? There's a lot. Yeah. The creative.
You're not limited.
No limits. There's no limits, right? So that's something where, I was going to say, sustainability. You take one thing and you have something that you can totally build up on again and again. And, if the graphics improve, if there's a new addition to Unreal or whatever, we can improve whatever content we had before with new designs and new look. That's our business. That's what we do.
Yeah, especially when you think about, let's say, pop-up stores. I mean, they've been everywhere for the last couple of years, and you're building up something every time and then you shut it down again.
Yeah. It's the same for fairs and exhibitions.
Exactly. And this is like, you already have like some kind of world built then that you could reuse or improve, but still reuse.
Yeah. And it's mobile compatible.
Oh, wow.
Tell me more. I think that's an amazing conclusion to our discussion, and I want to thank you for being our guests. I enjoyed it a lot. I hope it was the same for you. And I hope also our listeners and viewers enjoyed what we were discussing, and probably it opened their eyes a little bit in terms of what the metaverse, what AI, what all these new technologies can do for them, and in terms of utilizing them for their business, or just staying updated at least and seeing what technology brings along. And I also want to thank our friends from Red Piñata and Patty, who helped us out a lot with the technical setup here. So without them, we wouldn't have like so many camera angles and microphones. So,
and then go and check these guys out. We're gonna post their links down below. And Jan and June and Simon with For Real and Dionysus. Go check out those links. Some really interesting stuff there.
Yeah. Also, if you have ideas for other segments, other formats that we could do in the future, please,
or
suggestions. Yeah, please connect with us, because we're trying to build this format together with the audience to build something relevant and not just discuss anything that comes to our mind. But I think, we're happy to build this together. And also please don't forget to follow and subscribe to the podcast. Either you're listening on YouTube or Spotify or Anchor, or you followed us on LinkedIn, wherever you found us. Thanks so much for listening. Thanks so much to you guys again, and
see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.